Welcome to our next lecture on New Principles of Economics. This lecture explores money and value. It is a key chapter that bridges the part on what is traditionally referred to as microeconomics and the subsequent part with macroeconomic themes. The chapter closely aligns with chapter 12 on finance.
Our view departs substantially from the conventional approach to money. Economists typically treat money as a mere tool that intermediates market transactions. That is referred to as wheel without autonomous powers.
However, in macroeconomics, isn't there much talk about the role of money in driving aggregate developments in the economy?
That is true. We treat these phenomena as manifestations of specific mechanisms in the financial sector, but not as intrinsic to the institution of money. In the first place, this chapter looks at the basal mechanisms that establish money as an institution that expresses economic values. Even more, in our view, money has intrinsic value.
Indeed, money as value has been the object of moral and social controversies since it emerged in human societies. If it were a mere tool, why have people always worried, even about its almost demonic powers? I have seen it as corroding moral commitments. Inspired by the German sociologist Georg Simmel and his philosophy of money published more than a century ago, we explore the psychological and behavioral aspects of using money in the market context.
This is our agenda. We begin with dissecting the performative mechanisms that establish the institution of money, deploying the Aoki model introduced in the previous chapter. Then we move on to analyzing the role of money in assigning value to objects in the form of prices, that is, the activity of pricing. Pricing in the market contexts drive the basic pattern of arbitrage, such that on markets, prices for the same objects converge, the law of one price.
However, we do not stop here. Money has intrinsic value because it creates agential power by enhancing one's freedom of choice relative to others. This observation introduces us to the psychology of money.
How do money and prices affect people's psychological stances? We explore the framing of cognition and emotions when using money and perceiving situations as involving monetary prices. The next step is then to consider the notion of objectivization of subjective value. This means that prices transform values from the first-person view into the second-person view. Money becomes the essential medium of rationalizing choices.
We conclude by approaching money as a form of social capital. In traditional societies, credit mainly takes the form of mutual promises and commitments. In a fully developed monetary economy, credit takes the form of loans mediated by the financial sector. Trust in financial institutions and the money issuing authorities is depersonalized social capital. Let us turn to our first topic, explaining the institution of money.
In the previous chapter, we introduced the Aoki model of institutions, which is a powerful means to understand how money is established as performative. As a reminder, the Aoki model conceptualizes a circular causation in which institutions manifest themselves in signs as public representations. In the case of money, these are the money species and tokens, such as cash or entries in your digital bank account. Money tokens are handled in money practices that are shared in a population of users, and they relate to certain behavioral dispositions of using money in economic transactions. Let us look at this circular causation in more detail.
Money practices are motivated by the classical functions of money. These are money as the unit of account, money as a medium of transaction, and money as a store of values.
Monetary value is assigned to objects such as bananas or cars as a unit of account. This assignment allows for calculating values, especially aggregating them into a unified measure of wealth and conducting operations such as calculating costs and profit.
This function does not directly engage with the tokens, but those become important when money is used as a medium of transaction, where money is exchanged with goods and services. Economists emphasize the critical role of money in obliterating barter, which is onerous if two parties do not have coinciding needs and must go via indirect barter with third parties to meet their ends.
And for enabling this, money is a store of value. Minimally, to bridge the time gap between selling a good and purchasing another one. For example, in times of hyperinflation, this function might be jeopardized, such that people have to get rid of money as fast as possible, eventually falling back to barter. In normal times, money enables savings, such as in the simplest form of hoarding cash. As we see, the three functions of money are mutually reinforcing, although in principle, they can be independent. Historically, for example, in China, copper coins were used for exchange and silver coins as a store of value. Units of account can be fictional and relate to actual money tokens via a rate of exchange. The integration of the functions of money emerged in modern national states, which enforce a monopoly of the national currency.
These observations show that money practices emerge in the interactions in a population of money users. These interactions manifest strong positive network externalities, since the more people use a specific money species, the lower the transaction costs, because everyone trusts that they can exchange received money tokens with others. Such externalities explain, for example, why the US dollar today is the reigning currency of commerce and finance globally, and competitors, such as the Chinese yuan, have a difficult position as latecomers.
Money species emerge in an evolutionary process, which is reinforced by performative actions, such as accounting. Goods do not have an intrinsic monetary value. This value is assigned via the action of pricing, and this in turn enables accounting. Hence, money practices further converge in a population. As said, modern nation states enforce a specific money species, but as we will see in chapter 12, they may fail to stabilize the institution. In this case, the population-level dynamics may shift monetary practices, such as in the phenomenon of dollarization of a country, which suffers from monetary instability.
Such instabilities are further enhanced by the loss of trust into the national currency, right?
Indeed, this point leads us to the closure of the Aoki model for the case of money. Money practices are grounded in the behavioral dispositions which are manifest in trust as the key condition for money fulfilling its functions. This critical role of trust is salient in the modern institution of central banks, first famously elucidated by Walter Bacot in 19th century Britain. We explore their role in chapter 12.
In sum, the case of money shows how the Aoki model can be deployed in institutional analysis, relating to the two dimensions and levels in complex circular feedback mechanisms, which include interaction dynamics, performative actions, and psychological states.
Let us now move on to analyzing the institution of money in relation to value. As said, the key action enabled by money is pricing. Pricing assigns a monetary value, the price, to an object. There are many forms of pricing, often regulated by specific institutions, for example, in the case of auctions that can follow different rules. Pricing can be a key mode of market transactions, such as in the bazaar, where people haggle over prices. This is not the case in modern supermarkets, where goods carry a price tag and customers can take it or leave it. The seller monitors market developments and may change prices tactically, such as offering a discount. Intermediate forms include the negotiations over the price of a car at the second-hand car lot.
Since objects do not have an intrinsic monetary value, how can people know which price is the right one?
No one can know. The original assignment of a price is an entrepreneurial act under uncertainty. That is most obvious at the bazaar, where buyers and sellers try to hide their willingness to pay or accept a certain price in order to gain maximum advantage. Setting a price requires knowledge of market conditions, which are mostly complex and intransparent even for experts, sustaining an industry of business news reporting, consultancies, and data analysts. One of the most important sources of intelligence for price setting is observing the prices set by others, even though this does not necessarily reveal their reasons and motivations. Hence, uncertainty is also pervasive here.
This is the key explanation why in the real world, contrary to a simple theoretical model of prices flexibly balancing demand and supply, prices tend to be sticky. Changing a price is risky, since the price setter may not correctly anticipate the reactions of buyers. Observed pricing always needs interpretations, since there are many tactical reasons for changing prices and the underlying cost structures are unknown.
Another problem of price setting results from the endowment effect, a key result of behavioral economics research. The endowment effect implies that possessors of a good systematically overprice that good in exchange compared to the situation in which they are potential buyers of the same good. This means that there is a wedge between the two offers in exchange, which can even be observed in financial markets, where holders of shares often hold them too long because they overestimate their value. As we see, there can be a systematic deviation between subjective value and values as objectified on markets, in the sense of a second-person view of value as price.
Financial markets are a paradigmatic example of market process of arbitrage, which, therefore, might be encumbered by such effects, right?
Yes, arbitrage is the central process by which markets objectify values as prices, as stated in the so-called law of one price. Arbitrage results from the activity of trading, buying cheap and selling dear. Arbitrageurs search for price differences on markets for specific goods and exploit these for profit. If there is competition, this process will ultimately erode those profits and result in one price reigning the market.
However, this applies only to ideal markets.
Sure, once there are transaction costs, they drive a wedge between prices. Obviously, this applies to transport costs. The same goods can be more expensive in remote regions. There may also be an impact of uncertainty about product qualities or contracts, such that price differences compensate for risk differentials. This observation also implies that we can interpret the failure of the law of one price to apply for certain goods as revealing that, in fact, they are not the same. For example, in the European Union, financial markets may converge on pricing bonds issued by different governments. However, if they do not, we learn that investors perceive bonds of different countries as reflecting different risk classes, which means that they are actually not the same kind of asset. The differences reflect the persisting institutional differences between the European fiscal states and the unified European budget that is still pending.
Let us now turn to the question of whether money has intrinsic value. We interpret the widespread phenomenon of money illusion as reflecting this value. Money illusion means that people systematically fail to distinguish between real and nominal values of money. For example, workers would underestimate the effect of inflation on their wages. The money in the pocket has intrinsic value. Money illusion has been confirmed by psychological and neuroscientific research as reflecting independent rewards by holding money. Money is paradoxical. It seems to work as a primary reinforcer such as food or sex, but is entirely culturally acquired. There's no original human need for money.
How can we explain such a rewarding effect?
One hypothesis is that money embodies agential powers in the sense that money creates freedom of choice and, depending on the extent of market power, establishes an asymmetry between money holders and those who demand money. Consider a worker. The worker needs to earn money for living, and the employer can give access to it by paying a wage. The employer is more powerful than the worker because he can withhold the money and use it for other purposes, whereas a worker without savings might be dependent on earning the wage. On the other hand, the employer who sells goods on the marketplace depends on customers as money holders for making profits.
This points to our analysis in Chapter 5. A key question is asset specificity and the relative ranges of choices that the two parties in an exchange relationship have. If workers have fewer choices than employers, their agential power is lower. Money is the good with the relatively lowest level of specificity, since it can be used for the largest range of purposes. Hence, money systematically creates unequal agential powers if its distribution across parties is unequal.
These observations reveal the psychological effects of money. Psychological research has shown that there are two classes of effects, cognitive and emotional. Often, the emotional effects stem from the cognitive transformations triggered by money.
Money is a powerful cognitive medium, since assigning prices to objects allows for many operations that are impossible otherwise, such as dividing a cow into valued pieces, which might be compared with the value of other objects in exchange that are physically distinct. Hence, I can trade a cow for a set of tools that each have lesser value. For this, the unit of account is sufficient, such that the exchange can even be barter. Money allows for computing aggregate values of stocks with a complex physical composition of diverse objects.
There are more general cognitive effects which result from framing certain situations and decisions in terms of money. An example is the framing of a fee as a price. A famous result is that parents who come late to pick up their children at a childcare facility violate the rule of punctuality more frequently if a fee is introduced, because they may interpret this as a price for the service.
Indeed, money-driven cognitive transformations are ubiquitous. A wide range of phenomena relates to the transformation of a gift relationship into monetary exchange. Another famous result is Titmus' research on blood donations, where economists would expect that people donate even more if a monetary incentive reinforces the existing motivation to donate. But to the contrary, donations were less.
Georg Simmel already argued that money causes psychological transformations such as individualization and emotional distancing,
which has been confirmed today by many psychological experiments where people show clear behavioral differences, even if money is only present as a prime, meaning, for example, that they sit in a room with pictures of dollar coins and banknotes.
The cognitive transformations by money reflect its role in the objectivization of value in the second-person view. Economic theory suggests that subjective value is manifest in economic rent. Rent is the surplus value that a good creates beyond the realized price in terms of the hypothetical willingness to pay. For example, if I were willing to pay a price of $10 for bread, but the market price is only $5, my rent is $5. In fact, the opportunity cost of buying the bread for $5 is either the benefit of holding the $5 or the rent that I could have gained from buying an alternative good, which cannot be observed directly.
A famous European fairy tale shows what that means. Hans in Luck. When leaving his apprenticeship, the master gives him a heavy piece of gold. Burdened by that, Hans decides to exchange this for a horse to ride. This exchange is voluntary, so reveals that the rent generated by the horse surpasses the subjective value of the gold. As it happens, Hans meets other occasions where he continues to exchange his possessions, trading down via a cow, a pig, a goose, and so on, each time considering the new alternative as better. When he finally even loses his last possession, he's happy to be without any burden anymore and returns home to his mother full of joy.
The tale does just show that Hans is stupid, right?
No, after all, he's happy and learned his skills.
Why is he still regarded as silly?
Can only assess referring his behavior to the standard of money as objectifying value. In each decision, he gains subjective value, but loses monetary wealth. If he had understood that, he would have internalized that second-person view and, say, would have sold the gold to get money, then bought a horse and kept the surplus as savings. Hence, money transforms his behavior into rational behavior.
In this sense, we can say that the surplus money accumulating via the chain of exchange also indicates his subjective value via an objectified standard. If he had made surplus throughout the chain of exchange, he would have even gained more benefit than from the original piece of gold.
Isn't that what entrepreneurs do?
Yes, they aim at accumulating profits from exchange.
A specific form of rent is entrepreneurial rent. Economic transactions are uncertain, and entrepreneurs calculate their benefits in terms of money. Rent appears as profit. However, given uncertainty, they cannot predict profits, and therefore her decision reflects subjective value of the entrepreneurial opportunity.
Moreover, entrepreneurs may not compare entrepreneurial activity with a safe other activities, such as investing as compared to consuming, but different entrepreneurial projects, which are all uncertain. Hence, they don't know the opportunity costs of alternatives in terms of lost entrepreneurial rents.
In this case, money objectifies subjective value only ex post, showing that entrepreneurial visions proved right. Such objectification drives imitation.
Let us finally turn to money as a form of social capital. If we keep money, we actually give a loan to the issuing agency. We trust that others accept the money species as payment. In this sense, money is credit.
In traditional societies, credit mainly takes the form of mutual commitments and promises. If I lend seeds to my neighbor, I may expect that later he will give back a share of the harvest. This presupposes trust, hence social capital as introduced in chapter 8. In a community, there are many ways how such commitments can be enforced, most extremely via ostracism. However, gossip and a bad reputation may be enough in most cases. In contrast, money decouples credit from personal relationships.
But the neighbor may lend me money to buy the seeds.
Sure, these are traditional stages. Eventually, the farmer may borrow money from a bank. But this presupposes trust in the monetary system that backs the bank's operations.
I see. So, these observations build the bridge to Chapter 12 on finance. Trust is a key factor in creating the complex financial systems of our modern times. Hence, central banks produce a public good.
Let us now briefly summarize. Money is the key institution of markets and is the major distinctive feature of market exchange versus non-market exchange. The chapter approaches money as the core performative institution of the market, which we analyze in the frame of the Aoki model. The focal phenomenon is trust in money. Network externalities of money practices in populations of users stabilize a money species that realizes the function of unit of account, medium of a transaction, and store of value.
Pricing assigns money signs to objects. Pricing is an entrepreneurial act, since neither the reactions of other agents nor the future developments of parameters influencing pricing are certain. Pricing practices and technologies of trade determine the mechanisms of the law of one price. That creates the conditions for the emergence of an objectified second-person view on valuation. This process is arbitrage.
The value of money is rooted in its embodying of agential power with the greatest inclusiveness of choice and its property of almost zero specificity to market opportunity. It is salient in the various framing effects of money, which include individualization, social distancing, and emotional neutralization. Societies establish social norms that regulate behavior, considering these.
The concept of economic rent reveals the role of money in objectifying subjective valuation. For consumption choices, given a certain budget, prices convey information about lost alternatives and thus guide the rationalization of choices. This is an internalized arbitrage process in which alternatives are evaluated by prices, thus anchoring subjective valuation in the objectified second-person view of the market.
Money is a form of social capital bound to communities of exchange, reflecting general opportunities for exchange, which is universally fungible and tradable. The original solution to the problem of trilateral exchange is social credit as promises. In modern societies, trust in money is a depersonalized form of social credit.
We will further pursue the institutional details of credit and monetary policy in modern societies in Chapter 12 on finance. For today, we're finished and say goodbye to our audience.
Thank you very much.